Episode 1, The Breath Beneath the Walls. I arrived at St. Renaud's Monastery on a Tuesday soaked in rain. The carriage that brought me there refused to linger. The driver crossed himself twice and turned his horses around before I could thank him. I remember thinking that the building didn't look like it had been built, it looked like it had grown from the rock itself, a living thing carved by centuries of prayer and silence. Inside, the air was colder than the storm outside. My breath came out in thin ribbons, trembling before disappearing into the gloom. The abbot greeted me without a word. His lips moved, but it was as if the sound died before reaching my ears. Only his eyes spoke, two hollow lamps glowing faintly beneath his cowl. He gestured for me to follow. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the stone arches, but that wasn't what kept me awake. It was something else, something slower, heavier. At first I thought it was the sea, but the monastery was too far inland. Then I realized what it was. Breathing. Not the wind. Not the monks. The walls. It came in intervals, like the sigh of an enormous creature just beneath the floor. The stones expanded softly, exhaled dust, then settled again. The rhythm was patient, almost tender. I pressed my ear to the cold wall and heard it clearer, the low, wet drag of air moving through stone. I told myself it was the draft. That's what reason demanded. But when I closed my eyes, I felt the breath moving across my skin, as if the monastery was inhaling me. During morning prayers, I watched the others. Their faces were pale, their eyes fixed on the altar. No one seemed to notice the tremor underfoot, the faint pulse in the walls. When we sang the psalm, the echo didn't come back as it should, it came back delayed, softer, almost, mimicking us. At supper, Brother Elias sat beside me. His hands shook as he broke the bread. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he whispered. I didn't answer. "The breath," he continued. "Don't speak of it to the abbot. He says it's the Holy Spirit. But I've seen it, take things." That night I dreamt of corridors that curled like lungs, of doors that opened inward and kept opening. I woke to the sound of breathing again, closer this time, so close it rattled the cross above my bed. My candle flickered, then went out, as if the air had been stolen from it. I reached for my rosary, but the beads were damp, as though someone had held them in their mouth. The walls pulsed once more, deeper, slower. It wasn't only breath anymore. It was hunger. And in that darkness, I heard it whisper my name. Elias. Just once. But it was enough to know that the monastery wasn't sheltering me. It was waking up to me. Episode 2, The Door That Wasn't Built by Hands. It began the night after the whisper. Sleep was a mercy that no longer belonged to me. I lay in the narrow bed, listening to the monastery's slow respiration, each breath dragging through the stone like a tide beneath the earth. Around midnight, the air changed. It thickened, warm and damp, as though the monastery itself was leaning closer to me. Then I heard a click. Not loud. Not sharp. A soft, deliberate sound, like a latch turning itself. I lifted the candle, shielding the flame from the draft. But the corridor outside was silent, empty, the same lifeless stone I'd come to dread. Until I noticed it. At the end of the hall, past the row of identical wooden doors, there was one more. It hadn't been there yesterday. The door was older than the others, carved from blackened oak, its surface warped like dried skin. It seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Above it, there was a symbol, two concentric circles, intersected by a line that looked like a lung split in half. I called out softly, "Brother Elias?" No answer. The candle's flame bowed forward, drawn toward the door as if the wood were breathing in. When I stepped closer, the air around it trembled. It felt alive. The closer I came, the stronger the pulse became beneath my feet, matching the rhythm of the monastery's unseen breath. I reached for the iron handle. It was warm. Too warm. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a small, circular chamber I had never seen before. Candles burned without wicks, suspended in midair, flickering like trapped souls. And around the walls 12 stone statues knelt in prayer, their heads bowed, their faces covered by hoods. I should have turned back. I know that now. But curiosity has its own gravity. I stepped forward, and the door closed behind me. The air was thick with incense and rot. As I lifted the candle, my stomach turned. The statues were not carved stone. They were flesh, desiccated, dried and hollowed like husks. Skin pulled tight over bone. Their mouths open mid-prayer, as if they'd been frozen in the act of breathing out. And on the face of the one nearest to me, I saw something carved above the lips. A name. Brother Alphonse. The candle flickered violently. The statues began to shift slowly, subtly, as if their spines remembered life. Dust fell from their robes, and a sound filled the room. A faint exhale. Then another. 12 breaths, weaving together into a steady rhythm. They were breathing again. Behind me, the door dissolved into the wall. Gone. The only exit was their silence. And when I turned back toward them, every hooded head had lifted, every empty eye socket fixed on me. One of them, in a voice like wind over dry leaves, whispered, "It's your turn to pray." The walls pulsed once, inhaled deeply, and the candles dimmed, as if the monastery itself was taking that first, patient breath of me. Episode 3, The Chapel That Whispers Names. They rang the morning bell before dawn, though no one had pulled the rope. The sound rolled through the monastery like a dying heartbeat, slow, uneven, trembling. Every monk rose without question, drifting toward the chapel as if drawn by a command older than obedience. I followed, half awake, my heart still bruised from what I had seen the night before, the statues, the breathing, the name carved above their lips. The chapel was vast, but the air inside felt compressed, as though the walls had drawn closer overnight. Candles leaned inward, their flames fluttering in the same rhythm I'd begun to recognize as the monastery's breath. And then, as the abbot began the prayer, I heard it. At first, it sounded like wind. Then like whispers leaking through cracks in stone. But soon, the voices grew distinct, soft, steady, and countless. They came from the walls themselves, slipping between the chants of the monks. They were speaking names. Brother Samuel. Brother Alphonse. Brother Elias. Mine was last. I froze. The others didn't react, they just kept praying, their voices hollow, eyes glassy. It was as if they couldn't hear what I did, or worse, as if they already knew. The abbot's head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly, when my name was spoken. He smiled without looking at me. The kind of smile that said, "It's begun." The whispers continued, one name after another, but never the same list twice. I started counting 12 names, then 13, then 14. Each time, the last name whispered came true. A monk would vanish before the next dawn, his cell stripped clean, his robe folded neatly at the foot of his bed. No one asked where they went. No one dared. I tried to tell Brother Matthias, the youngest among us. He laughed nervously, told me I was overtired. But the next morning, his name echoed last. By evening, his candle burned alone on the altar. That night, I locked my door. I pressed my ear to the cold stone wall, and it was still breathing, slow, calm, content. But beneath that rhythm, another sound pulsed. A new whisper forming, hesitant, testing the air like a tongue tasting a word for the first time. It was my name again. I whispered back, "What do you want?" The wall answered with something that chilled my bones. It exhaled. A gust of warm air slid through the cracks, carrying the faint scent of myrrh and decay. Then, through that breath, came a voice softer than any prayer. To remember you. The candle went out. The air turned still, as if the monastery had finished breathing for the night. But before sleep took me, I understood something terrible. The monastery didn't just breathe, it learned the rhythm of those within it. And when it could mimic you perfectly, that was when it whispered your name. That was when it replaced you. Episode 4, The Nun Who Never Breathed Out. They told her story in whispers, as if the mere act of saying her name could awaken her. Sister Magdalene. The nun who never breathed out. The legend was older than the monastery itself, older, some said, than prayer. I found her name by accident, etched faintly into the corner of a weathered ledger kept in the abbot's library. Excommunicated and buried beneath the south cloister, 1892. The page ended there, as if someone had decided that was all history deserved to remember. But I had already begun to hear her before I ever found her name. Each night after prayers, as I lay in my narrow cell, a faint inhale crept through the cracks in the wall. It wasn't like the monastery's great, slow breathing, this was smaller, sharper. It sounded like someone fighting to stay alive. I began counting the seconds between the breaths. There was never an exhale. Only that endless, desperate draw of air. One night, I followed it. The corridors seemed to stretch longer than usual, as if the monastery didn't want me to arrive. Every step I took echoed twice, once for me, and once for something following behind. The air grew heavy with the smell of damp cloth and roses long dead. I reached the south cloister. The moonlight seeped through the broken glass, silvering the floor. There, hidden beneath an uneven patch of tiles, I found what looked like the edge of a stone lid. A tomb. Her tomb. The inscription was barely legible, carved by a trembling hand. Sister Magdalene, still in prayer. I knelt beside it, pressing my palm to the stone. It was warm. Then I felt it, a faint pulse, like the heartbeat of something sleeping beneath my hand. The breath came again, deep and slow, pulling the dust inward through the cracks. I heard it pass beneath the stone, circling, rising. And then, from inside the tomb, a whisper. Not words at first. Just sound. The fragile shiver of lips that hadn't moved in a century. Then it formed a shape. Don't exhale. The stone trembled. A single line split across the lid, wide enough for a sliver of air to escape. It carried the smell of flesh, of wax, of prayers that had gone sour with time. My candle sputtered and went out, suffocated by the breath escaping the grave. In the darkness, I felt fingers brush my ankle, cold, dry, trembling. The breath grew louder, closer, wrapping around me like a serpent coiling for warmth. I stumbled backward. The crack in the stone widened, and a small piece of cloth slipped out, a fragment of an old habit, still damp as if someone had just taken it off. The whisper came again, clearer now, right beside my ear. If I breathe out, it will all begin again. The monastery exhaled at that exact moment, a deep, thunderous breath that shook the floors and bent the candles in the chapel above. And for the first time, I realized the truth. She wasn't dead. She had been breathing for all of us. And if she ever stopped, the monastery would have to find a new lung. Episode 5, The Confessional Without a Priest. I hadn't spoken to anyone for 3 days. Silence had become a second skin, tight, suffocating, familiar. The abbot said it was penance for curiosity. For opening what was meant to stay sealed. He told me to confess. The confessional stood in the far corner of the chapel, carved from dark walnut, veined with age. Its lattice screen looked like ribs. I'd walked past it every day, yet somehow I'd never noticed how alive it felt, how the air around it seemed to throb gently, in rhythm with the monastery's breathing. That evening, I entered the left booth. The wood creaked like a sigh. A faint smell of incense lingered, mixed with something sour, something human. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "It has been. I don't know how long since my last confession." No answer. Only a slow inhale from the other side. I waited. My pulse matched the rhythm of that breath, deep, measured, impossibly patient. Then came the exhale, long and warm, passing through the tiny holes in the screen, brushing my cheek like a living hand. "I am listening," the voice said. It was not the abbot. The tone was low and wet, as if the words were formed through water. Still, it sounded almost kind. I hesitated. I opened a tomb. I disturbed the resting place of a nun. A pause. Then a whisper, closer now, as though the speaker's lips pressed against the screen. "You did not disturb her. You freed her." My stomach tightened. "Who are you?" Another inhale. "You know me. You all do." The walls around me began to pulse. The wood of the booth flexed ever so slightly, expanding with every drawn breath, shrinking with every release. The lattice pressed gently against my face. "Tell me your sin," the voice said again, calm, commanding. I felt something inside me unravel. Words spilled out like blood. "I doubt God," I whispered. "I doubt that He hears us here. I think this place was never meant for prayer." The other side laughed softly, a sound like stone grinding on bone. "You're right, Brother Elias. This is not His house." The candle outside flickered and died. The confessional plunged into darkness. And then, through the screen, a pale shape moved. A hand, thin, colorless, breathing mist, slid through the gaps and touched my chest. I felt its warmth sink into me, deep and consuming, until I could no longer tell whose heartbeat I heard, mine, or the monastery's. "Your doubt is holy," the voice murmured. "But confession is not for forgiveness. It is for feeding." The hand withdrew. The booth's wood exhaled, and the smell of decay flooded the air. When I stumbled out, gasping, the right booth, the priest's side, was empty. But on the seat lay a single object, a mirror, cracked and clouded with breath. I wiped it clean. And saw a face that wasn't mine, staring back, smiling through a veil of fog, lips moving soundlessly, repeating a prayer I never learned. When I looked away, the confessional took a deep, shuddering breath. As if it had just eaten. Episode 6, The Candle That Refused to Die. For 3 nights after the confessional, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mirror fogged with breath that wasn't mine, the reflection still whispering prayers in the dark. I kept a single candle burning beside my bed, the last flame I trusted. It was ordinary, the kind we used for prayer, white wax, short wick, nothing sacred about it. Yet as the nights passed, I began to notice something unnatural. The candle never died. No matter how long it burned, its body never shrank. The wax didn't drip, the wick didn't curl. It stood upright, eternal, like a frozen tongue of light. I thought it was a blessing at first, a gift of mercy after so many horrors. But mercy has a strange scent when it comes from this place. On the 4th night, I woke to find the flame trembling violently, though there was no wind. The shadows it cast weren't still, they moved. Dozens of them, rippling across the walls like shapes struggling to climb out of darkness. I leaned closer, my breath shallow. The candle flickered once, and the shadows stopped. Every one of them was kneeling. Figures of monks, women, children. Their heads bowed, hands clasped. The silhouettes were sharp, but they had no source. No one stood between the candle and the wall. And yet, they prayed. I whispered, "Who are you?" The flame brightened, as if pleased. The shadows lifted their heads in unison. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw faces, eyes hollow, mouths stitched in silent hymns. Then the light dimmed again, and they sank back into stillness. I tried to snuff the candle out. It didn't work. I pinched the flame between my fingers, but instead of heat, I felt cold, a cold that breathed. The flame pulsed beneath my hand, pushing back against me like a living lung. When I pulled away, my fingertips were pale, as if blood had fled them. That's when I realized the candle was feeding. Not on wax, but on me. Every time I watched it, I felt weaker. My breath shorter. My heart slower. The candle grew brighter with every inhale I took, as though each breath I gave became fuel for its flame. Desperate, I covered it with a metal bowl. The sound that came next made my stomach twist. It wasn't the muffled hiss of smothered fire. It was a sigh. Long, mournful, disappointed. The bowl trembled. Then it began to rise. Light spilled out from beneath it, golden and violent, tearing through the cracks in the metal. The flame didn't just survive, it expanded, filling the room with a warmth that wasn't comforting but watchful. In its glow, I saw the shape of the monastery itself forming in the wavering light, the arches, the cloisters, the breath moving through its walls. And within that living structure, a single glowing lung pulsed at its center. My candle. I understood then. The monastery didn't need walls of stone. It built itself through faith, through fear, through anything that burned and refused to die. And now it had its light. When dawn came, I found the candle standing where it always had been. Untouched. Pure. Its flame small again, innocent as a prayer. But on the wall behind it, burned into the plaster, were the outlines of 12 shadows. Kneeling. Waiting. And one of them, one unmistakably, was mine. Episode 7, The Choir Without Throats. Dawn came without light. Only the bell rang, soft, uneven, as if rung by a trembling hand. It called us to matins, the morning prayer, though the air still clung to darkness like wet cloth. When I stepped into the chapel, the others were already kneeling. Dozens of monks, heads bowed, hands folded. Their silhouettes trembled in the flicker of cold candles. I joined them in silence, trying to pray, but the sound that followed was not silence. It was singing. Low at first, like breath forced through hollow reeds, then rising, swelling, turning into a hymn so hauntingly beautiful that my knees weakened. The walls vibrated with it. The ceiling seemed to tremble under the weight of voices too many for the living to contain. But no one's lips were moving. The choir filled the chapel, yet every monk's mouth was closed, their throats still, their faces drained of sound. Their eyes were half open, reflecting candlelight like glass. Who sings? I whispered. Brother Lucien beside me lifted his gaze slowly. His lips parted just enough for a whisper to slip through. They do. Who? He didn't answer. He just pointed upward. The rafters were veiled in smoke from the incense burners. For a moment, I thought I saw the shapes of faces forming in it, white, trembling outlines, mouths open wide. The hymn grew louder, and the air thickened with the scent of burning myrrh and something else, something like iron. Then I noticed their robes. The monks kneeling around me, every one of them, had the faint stain of blood along the collars. Dried. Old. As if their throats had once been cut open, stitched shut, then forgotten. The hymn shifted key. Higher now. Almost joyful. The sound pressed into my chest, vibrating through bone. I clutched my rosary, whispering a prayer that came out broken. A single drop of something warm landed on my hand. I looked up. From the rafters, a figure hung upside down, a monk without a face, throat torn open, ribs cracked like harp strings. Yet from that ruin came song. Not agony. Harmony. One by one, more shapes emerged from the smoke above, suspended by invisible threads, their hollow throats glowing faintly with inner fire. Their song was no longer holy, it was hungry. The abbot raised his hand, signaling the end of prayer. The living monks fell silent, but the singing did not stop. It grew louder, shaking dust from the crucifix. The abbot turned toward me. His voice was calm, steady, practiced. "Do not interrupt them, Brother Elias. They sing to keep the monastery alive." I felt something tug at my neck, a subtle pull, like unseen fingers tracing the line of my throat. My breath hitched. The hymn faltered for a single beat. And in that pause, every ghostly head turned toward me. Their mouths opened wider, sound flooding the room like water breaking a dam. My vision blurred, my chest tightened. I realized, too late, what they were doing. They were stealing my voice. When I tried to scream, no sound came. Only a breath. The choir swelled triumphantly, their song rich again. And above the roar, I heard one voice whisper, soft, familiar, almost tender. "Now you'll never interrupt the prayer." Episode 8, The Breath Test. We were told the ritual was sacred. A simple test of faith, the abbot said. To breathe as one with God is to live as one with Him. But I had already learned that in St. Renaud's monastery, nothing sacred stayed pure for long. It began just before dawn, when the fog still clung to the arches like a living thing. The abbot led us into the refectory, though all the tables and benches had been cleared away. In their place, chalk symbols covered the floor, spirals, circles, lungs, all drawn by trembling hands. The walls glistened with condensation, dripping in rhythm, as if even the stones were sweating in anticipation. Each monk took his place along the markings, kneeling in silence. The abbot stood at the center, his hands folded over his chest. He inhaled deeply. The sound was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. We followed. "One breath," he whispered. "One body. One faith." At first, it was peaceful. The air was cold, but clean. We inhaled together, exhaled together, like a great living machine. The sound of it echoed off the ceiling, a strange harmony of lungs and devotion. Then the abbot changed the rhythm. He began to inhale longer, deeper, beyond what the body should allow. His chest swelled grotesquely, ribs straining beneath his robes. We tried to match him, desperate not to fall out of pace. My lungs burned. My vision flickered at the edges. Still, I drew in air until pain became prayer. "Do not break the rhythm," he said softly. "If you do, the monastery will notice." Beside me, Brother Lucien gasped and coughed. The moment he exhaled out of sync, the candles flickered violently. The floor trembled. The chalk markings around him began to glow faintly red. The abbot did not look at him. He only said, "Too soon." Lucien tried to stand, but his knees buckled. The air around him thickened, turning visible a distortion, a shimmer. Then I saw it, the monastery itself breathing through him. His robes pressed inward as if invisible hands were squeezing the air from his body. He clawed at his chest, but nothing came out. When the sound stopped, he was still kneeling, head bowed, unmoving. His mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. The abbot exhaled at last, and the room sighed with him. "You see," he said gently. "When one lung fails, the body suffers. But the body survives." He turned to me. "Brother Elias, take his place." I hesitated, staring at Lucien's lifeless body, his chest caved in as though the monastery had drunk him dry. But I moved forward. I knelt. And when I took my next breath, the floor beneath me pulsed. The stone was warm, alive, and I realized the monastery was inhaling with me, its breath flowing through mine. For a moment, it felt divine. My pain faded. My heart slowed. I could feel the rhythm of every wall, every corridor, every hidden lung of this place moving as one. Then the abbot whispered in my ear, "Now, try not to breathe out." My lungs screamed. The world dimmed. I tried to hold the air, but the monastery wanted it. It pulled at it, dragging the breath from my chest like a thief tearing cloth. When I finally exhaled, it wasn't relief I felt. It was hunger. Because the monastery didn't just take my air. It left something behind. A warmth in my lungs that wasn't mine. A second heartbeat. A borrowed rhythm. And from that moment, I no longer knew whether I was breathing inside the monastery, or the monastery was breathing inside me. Episode 9, The Well That Exhaled Smoke. By the 9th week, the air itself had become unholy. Every breath inside St. Renaud's felt heavy, thick with something unseen, something that didn't belong in the lungs of men. I would wake at night gasping, my chest trembling as if someone else was breathing through me. The other monks no longer spoke. They only inhaled in rhythm, their eyes half closed, their faces shining with a strange, fevered devotion. It was Brother Hugo who first mentioned the well. "There's smoke under the monastery," he whispered, voice trembling. "It rises through the cracks when the prayers get too loud." That's where it began, the first breath. That night, I went to find it. The path to the old courtyard was half buried in moss. The stones were slick, the moon veiled by thick clouds. In the center stood the well, an ancient ring of stone, chained shut by rusted iron. A single crucifix leaned against it, split down the middle. When I approached, the ground seemed to hum beneath my feet. The closer I got, the warmer the air became. Then, from deep within, I heard it, a faint exhalation, slow and steady, as if the earth itself were sighing. I knelt and placed my hand on the stone. It vibrated softly, breathing in and out, and with each exhale came a wisp of smoke, thin, dark, and alive. It curled upward like a serpent tasting the air. I should have turned away. But curiosity is the monastery's most perfect snare. I pried at the chains until they snapped, one by one. As the lid loosened, a single gust erupted upward, hot, wet, smelling of ashes and salt. It was not air. It was memory. The smoke formed shapes, faces twisting in agony, eyes hollow, mouths open in soundless cries. I stumbled back, covering my mouth, but it was too late. The breath found me. It slithered down my throat, cold and alive, filling me with its weight. My knees buckled. For a moment I couldn't see, couldn't hear, only feel. 1,000 whispers clawed inside me, desperate for voice. When my vision cleared, I wasn't alone. Around the well stood figures made of smoke, priests, nuns, penitents, their outlines trembling in the dark. Their faces were half-formed, their chests hollow, and from those hollows came that same rhythmic breathing that haunted the monastery. One of them stepped forward. His eyes were pits of flame. "You opened what he sealed," the figure rasped. "You've given it breath again." "What are you?" I choked. "We are what it exhaled last," it said. "And now it breathes again." The smoke surged upward, coiling around the walls, seeping into every crack, every corridor. I could feel the monastery shudder, its stones expanding as if the entire structure were filling its lungs for the first time in years. When the exhale came, it wasn't just air that left the well. It was light. Every candle in the monastery flared, then died. The night turned completely black, alive, moving, whispering. I crawled away, coughing, my lungs burning. From behind me, the well moaned like a living throat, endless and deep. And over the sound of that breath, I heard a single word spoken by 100 voices at once. Inhale. I did. And the smoke obeyed. Episode 10, The Painting That Inhaled Souls. The painting hung above the altar, draped in velvet and silence. I had passed it countless times without noticing it. But after the well exhaled its smoke, something in the chapel changed. The air had weight now, as if light itself had been captured and chained. And there, behind the veil, I could feel it watching. When the abbot summoned me that morning, he was smiling again. His smile never reached his eyes. "You've seen the smoke," he said. "Then you must understand. The monastery lives through faith, and faith must be fed." He pulled back the curtain. It was a painting of Christ crucified. But not like any I had ever seen. His face was not serene, it moved. Not in motion, but in memory, as though the paint had been layered over flesh that refused to die. His eyes followed me. His lips trembled faintly, parting as if to draw breath. I stepped closer, unable to look away. The air near it was warm, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Do you see it breathing?" the abbot whispered. And yes, I did. The chest of the painted Christ rose and fell beneath the varnish, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably real. When he exhaled, a faint hiss swept through the chapel, carrying with it the scent of incense and rust. The abbot gestured for me to kneel. "Pray," he said. "Give him your faith. He will remember you." I obeyed. The moment my lips formed the first prayer, the painting brightened. The candlelight seemed to bend toward it, drawn into its depths. The colors deepened, the skin turned luminous, the blood along his ribs glistened wet and fresh. And then I felt it. A pull. Something tugged inside my chest, gently at first, then harder. I couldn't stop praying, the words poured out of me like air escaping a punctured lung. My vision blurred, and the Christ on the canvas leaned forward, his mouth widening in a silent inhale. The abbot's voice came softly beside me, almost tender. "He takes only what you offer." But it wasn't true. He was taking everything. When I collapsed, gasping, I saw what I hadn't before. The other monks kneeling near the altar were pale, frail things. Their eyes dim, their lips blue. Each of them prayed with the same fervor, and with every whispered amen, the painting grew more radiant, while they dimmed like dying candles. I crawled backward. The abbot didn't move. His eyes were glassy, devoted. "This," he said, "is his mercy. The monastery breathes because he does. And he breathes because we believe." Behind him, the Christ exhaled. The sound was deep, hollow, and wet. A gust of air swept through the chapel, extinguishing every candle except the ones before the painting. The wax melted faster than fire should allow, dripping like blood onto the marble. When I turned to flee, the floor beneath me pulsed once, an echo of the same steady rhythm that haunted every wall. At the doorway, I looked back one last time. The painting had changed. The Christ's face was fuller. His eyes brighter. His skin warm with color. And at the bottom edge of the canvas, painted in tiny, trembling strokes, was a new figure, kneeling, faceless, hands clasped in prayer. It wore my robes. Episode 11, The Room That Held Its Breath. There was one door in the monastery no one spoke of. No prayers were whispered near it, no candles ever burned beside it. It stood at the far end of the east wing, sealed with iron, blackened with age, its hinges fused into silence. They called it the room that held its breath. Brother Hugo warned me never to go near it. "It doesn't let air leave," he said, his eyes wide and hollow. "Whatever goes in it stays. But curiosity is louder than fear." And by then, fear had become my closest companion. That night, after Compline, I followed the dim corridor alone. The walls there were slick, sweating with condensation. The monastery's breathing grew quieter the closer I came, until finally, it stopped. I had never known silence could be so loud. When I reached the door, I pressed my hand against it. It was cold, but not dead cold. It was the kind of chill that trembles, that waits. I felt a faint pulse beneath the metal, slow and patient, as though something behind it were counting my heartbeats. The keyhole was filled with wax, yet a crack ran through the center. Through it, I felt the faintest hint of suction, like the door itself was inhaling. I whispered a prayer I no longer believed in, then pushed. The door opened with a sound like lungs tearing. Inside, the air was still. Heavy. Too heavy. The candle flame flattened, struggling to live. I felt pressure in my ears, my chest tightening, as though the room were drinking every trace of breath I carried with me. The walls were covered in writing. Not ink. Not paint. But ash. Thousands of words smeared by trembling hands, written in circles that spiraled inward toward the center of the floor. There, in that center, was a chair. And in that chair sat a monk. Or what was left of one. He was mummified, yet upright, his head tilted back, his mouth open in an eternal gasp. Around his throat was a ring of rusted metal, bolted into the floor. The air shimmered faintly around his body, bending light like heat above fire. I stepped closer. The candle trembled. Then I noticed something impossible. His chest moved. A breath. A single, slow inhale. I froze. The candlelight flickered, stretching his shadow along the wall. It was longer than it should have been, so long that it reached me. When it touched my feet, I felt the air pulled from my lungs, my candle dimming as my vision blurred. The monk's head turned slightly toward me. His eyes were gone, but his mouth moved, releasing a whisper dry as dust. Don't exhale, it wakes the room. The walls quivered. The writing began to smear itself, the ashes twisting upward like dark mist. My body screamed for air, but the room swallowed every gasp before it could escape my lips. Then the monk's jaw snapped open wider, far wider than human bone should allow, and I understood. He wasn't breathing for himself. He was breathing for it. The monastery's first breath. The one that gave life to stone. The one that never ended. I stumbled toward the door, lungs burning, vision tunneling. Behind me, the room inhaled, dragging everything inward: air, sound, light. The candle vanished in an instant. I fell through the doorway just as the door slammed shut on its own. The seal hissed, and the silence returned. When I finally coughed air into my chest again, it tasted wrong, stale, used. The monastery had stopped breathing. For the first time since I arrived, the silence was absolute. And I knew, with a dread that felt almost holy, that it was only waiting for me to breathe first. Episode 12, The Saint Who Suffocated. The silence lasted 3 days. 3 days without the monastery's breath. Without its pulse. Without its heartbeat hiding in the walls. And for those 3 days, I thought it might finally be dead. But on the 4th day, the bells rang. They rang without hands, without ropes, vibrating with a rhythm too steady to be human. The sound wasn't a call to prayer, it was a summons. And it led us all to the crypt. The abbot walked first, his steps unnaturally light, as if his feet no longer touched the earth. We followed him through the narrow tunnel beneath the chapel, where the air grew thick and sweet with decay. The walls glistened as if they were sweating incense. At the end of the passage stood a massive stone door etched with a single name. Saint Corvinus. The one who died without air, the abbot murmured. The one who proved silence is salvation. He placed his palm against the door, and the stone shuddered like living flesh. A deep sigh escaped the seam, carrying with it the warmth of something that had not cooled in centuries. Then, the door opened. Inside lay the saint. His body was perfect, untouched by rot or time. The skin still soft, the lips slightly parted, the hands folded across his chest. But what froze my blood was his chest. It was rising. Slowly. Gently. With the rhythm of sleep. He breathed still, the abbot whispered reverently. God marked him eternal. But I could see it in the flicker of candlelight, the truth hiding beneath the miracle. Every time Saint Corvinus inhaled, the torches dimmed. Every exhale made the air colder. And in those fleeting breaths, I heard faint cries, small, desperate gasps belonging to voices that weren't his. The monks began to chant. Their words rolled like thunder, echoing through the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. I watched the saint's chest rise higher, faster, greedier. The air thinned. My lungs ached. I fell to my knees. He was stealing it. Each breath he took was ours. I looked up and saw the abbot smiling, his face half lit, half shadow. Do you understand now, Brother Elias? He is the first lung of this holy house. Every breath he draws gives life to us. To the monastery. But I felt no life. Only suffocation. The torches flickered out, one by one, until only the faint glow from the saint's skin remained. The chanting stopped. The silence pressed down again, thick, total. Then Saint Corvinus opened his eyes. They were clouded, like glass filled with fog. His lips moved slowly, forming words that scraped against the air like stone on bone. Exhale for me. The monks obeyed at once, their bodies trembling as they released their breath in unison. The saint inhaled deeply, his chest swelling, the color flooding back into his face. The abbot fell to his knees in ecstasy. I tried to hold my breath, but the air around me moved like a tide. It pulled at me, dragging the oxygen from my lungs until I felt my vision darken. And in that fading moment, I saw the truth. Saint Corvinus wasn't preserving the monastery. He was consuming it, breath by breath, soul by soul. His immortality wasn't a blessing. It was hunger made divine. When I awoke, the crypt was empty. The abbot and the others were gone. Only the saint remained, his chest still moving, his mouth curled into a faint smile. And beneath the echo of his breath, I heard a sound I had longed for yet dreaded to hear again. The monastery's inhale, slow and deep, returning to life. It was breathing once more. And this time, it was breathing through me. Episode 13, The Abbot's Last Exhale. By the time dawn broke, the monastery had changed its rhythm. The breaths that once filled its halls were no longer steady, they came in violent gasps, like the lungs of a dying god. The monks moved like shadows, silent, obedient, eyes glassy with something beyond faith. I watched them shuffle through corridors, their chests rising and falling in time with the walls. It was as if they were not breathing air anymore, but each other. The abbot had withdrawn into the chapel. No one was allowed to enter. But I could hear him from the hall, his breathing louder than any voice, deeper than thunder, echoing through the stone like a great bellows feeding fire. When he finally summoned me, his voice came not from within the room, but through it. Brother Elias, he said, and my name shivered through the wood. You have seen the saint, you have felt his breath within you. Now you will witness the end of mine. I pushed open the doors. The chapel was flooded with golden light, though no candles burned. The abbot stood before the altar, his robes torn, his chest bare. His ribs strained beneath his skin, each one moving independently, flexing with each monstrous inhale. Around him, the walls pulsed as if they shared his lungs. With every breath he drew, the monastery swelled. With every exhale, it groaned, the stones sighing like flesh under weight. He turned to me. His eyes were radiant, fevered. For years I gave it life, he said. I fed it with faith, with prayer, with lungs that never rested. But it has outgrown me. His hand pressed against his heart. It wants more than I can give. I stepped forward, shaking. What is it, Father? He smiled. It was a terrible smile, serene and hollow. The breath before creation. The silence after God. The thing that remembers him and hungers still. He spread his arms, exhaled deeply, and the floor beneath us cracked. The air turned heavy, vibrating with unseen force. His breath didn't fade, it lingered, hanging in the air as a living mist. It moved toward the altar, curling around it like smoke taking form. Then came the sound. A slow, wet inhale, deeper, older, infinite. The monastery was breathing through the abbot now. His chest heaved backward, the ribs snapping one by one. The sound was sharp and wet. His eyes rolled white, his lips blue. But he didn't scream. He smiled. Do you feel it, Elias? He gasped. The holy air, it wants you next. I stumbled back, choking. The golden light turned dark, the air thick with iron and incense. The abbot's body began to lift weightless, swaying, his lungs collapsing inward as the monastery exhaled through him. His final breath came not from his mouth, but from the walls themselves. It rushed through the chapel in a violent gale, knocking down every cross, extinguishing every flame. When it passed, his body was gone. Only his robes remained, deflated, empty. And yet, I could still hear him. The air whispered from every corner, every crack, every pore of the stone. The monastery no longer needs a man to breathe. I fell to my knees, gasping. The air burned my throat, filling me with warmth and dread. When I exhaled, the walls exhaled with me. The abbot's voice rose again, faint but endless. Inhale, Brother Elias. Give it your last. Let it live. I tried to resist. I tried to hold the breath. But the air was alive now, too heavy, too divine, too hungry. And when I finally exhaled, I felt something leave me that was more than air. It was faith. It was life. It was mine. Episode 14, The Lung of God. The abbot was gone. His robes lay deflated before the altar, fluttering with every exhale the monastery took. I stood alone in that holy carcass of stone, the silence no longer still but watchful. The air had changed. It felt warm now, too warm, as if it had passed through something alive before reaching me. Each breath filled my lungs with a strange sweetness that wasn't air at all. It was worship made physical. For days, I wandered the corridors without sleep. The monastery no longer followed the hours of prayer. Bells rang in random intervals, sometimes from beneath the floor, sometimes from inside the walls. The other monks had vanished. Their cells were empty, but their breaths lingered, gentle sighs that rose and fell from the mattresses, as if their bodies were still there, unseen. It was on the seventh night that I heard it. A heartbeat. Faint, rhythmic, echoing from the depths beneath the chapel. Not the beating of human flesh, but something far larger, deeper, older. The breath's source. The monastery's heart. I followed it down the ancient stairwell that wound beneath the crypt, the air growing thicker, heavier with each step. The sound grew louder, each beat vibrating through my ribs. By the time I reached the bottom, my candle had gone out, not from wind, but from suffocation. And there it was. A cavern carved not by hands but by hunger. The walls glistened like wet skin, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the breath. In the center lay a mass so vast it filled the space entirely, a mountain of living flesh and stone, expanding and contracting in slow, perfect harmony. The lung of God. That's what my mind called it before my faith could stop me. It wasn't a metaphor. It was real. Veins of marble ran through it like arteries, glowing faintly with molten light. With every inhale, the cavern pulled air from nowhere, and with every exhale, it whispered words too ancient to belong to man. I fell to my knees. Not in worship. In terror. Faces surfaced in the flesh, forming and fading with every breath. The monks. The abbot. Sister Magdalene. Even Saint Corvinus. Their mouths opened and closed in the rhythm of the inhale, their eyes blank but wet, as if caught forever in the act of breathing for something greater. I crawled forward, shaking, unable to look away. My hand touched the surface, warm, wet, trembling. It moved beneath my palm, pressing up gently, as if recognizing me. A voice filled the chamber. Not spoken. Not heard. Felt. You are its last breath, Elias. I froze. The voice wasn't divine. It was the monastery itself, breathing through me. It was never meant to praise him, it continued. It was meant to replace him. We are the new air. The lung began to inhale, deeper and deeper, pulling the air from my body, from my thoughts, from my will. The light within it grew blinding, and the faces inside began to scream silently. I fought to breathe, to resist, but my chest wouldn't obey. The world shimmered, colors bleeding into one another. My vision narrowed. And in that moment, I saw the truth that split my faith in two. The monastery was not serving God. It was becoming him. Every prayer, every chant, every confession had been oxygen, fuel for its divinity. And now it wanted the last breath of the last man who still remembered what it was like to doubt. I tried to crawl away, but the air around me thickened, wrapping me in invisible hands. The lung whispered one last time, its voice echoing inside my bones. Exhale, Elias. Let creation breathe again. I felt my chest loosen, my body surrender. The world faded into a pulse, one rhythm, one breath. And as I exhaled, the monastery inhaled, roaring with life. The walls shuddered. The ground rose. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to breathe like God. Episode 15, The Silence Before the Inhale. I woke to silence. No wind. No rustle of robes. No whispers from the walls. Just silence, vast, endless, terrifying. For the first time since I had entered St. Renaud's, the monastery wasn't breathing. The air hung heavy and stale, thick as oil in my lungs. Every sound I made seemed to die before it reached the air, swallowed by the weight of something waiting. The lung of God was still. It had inhaled my faith, my fear, my very voice, and now it waited. I stumbled through the corridors that had once pulsed like veins. They were rigid now, brittle as old bone. Statues that once wept now stared with cracked eyes. The candles along the chapel stood unlit, yet faint smoke still curled from their wicks as if they had only just died. It felt like the world had been paused mid-breath. I reached the chapel doors and pushed them open. The air beyond was warm, sweet, suffocating. The painting of Christ above the altar had changed again. His wounds were gone. His chest motionless. His eyes closed. He was waiting too. Breathe, Brother Elias. The voice came from nowhere, yet from everywhere. The walls shimmered faintly, a ripple moving through stone like the first flutter of a heartbeat returning. You are the last lung. The last vessel. The world cannot exhale without you. I shook my head. No. You've taken enough. The silence answered with a pulse, a faint, rhythmic vibration underfoot. The monastery shuddered. Dust fell from the rafters. From deep below, I heard the faint groan of something awakening. It wanted to inhale again. I fell to my knees, pressing my hands to my chest. My lungs ached. Each breath I tried to draw felt borrowed. I realized then that the air inside me no longer belonged to me, it was the monastery's, sealed inside me like a seed waiting to bloom. Breathe for us, the voice whispered again, soft as prayer, and we will begin anew. No, I rasped. If I breathe now, you will live forever. The silence thickened, pressing in on me from all sides. I could feel the weight of the monks, of every soul the monastery had devoured, crowding the air around me, unseen but near. Their presence trembled like a heartbeat. And then, they began to breathe through me. Not sound, motion. My chest rose without my consent. My ribs expanded until pain bloomed sharp and bright. I tried to resist, but the breath forced itself upward, ancient and vast, filling me with warmth and despair. The painting's eyes opened. The Christ on the wall stared down at me, not with mercy, but with hunger. His chest began to rise again, mirroring mine. The monastery was using me. I was the conduit, the bridge between life and silence. If I exhaled, the world outside these walls would feel it, the awakening of something divine and terrible. I clutched the floor, shaking, the sound of my pulse roaring in my ears. You won't have it, I whispered. You won't have my last breath. The voice sighed through the rafters, almost sorrowful. Then everything will die with you. So be it. The air inside me convulsed, desperate to escape. My vision blurred, black closing in at the edges. I pressed my lips shut, forcing my lungs to hold the impossible weight. Stone cracked around me. The wall screamed, contracting like lungs deprived of air. Faces appeared in the surface, hundreds of them, monks, saints, sinners, all pleading, gasping for release. Breathe, they begged. I held. I held until my vision fractured into light, until my body trembled on the edge of collapse. And then, silence. Pure. Eternal. The monastery stopped moving. The air cooled. The faces vanished. For a moment, I thought I had one. Then I heard it. A sound so small it might have been imagined. The faintest inhale. Not mine. It came from everywhere at once. From the walls. From the earth. From the heavens. The monastery no longer needed me. It had learned how to breathe alone. And as the sound grew steady, eternal, divine, I realized my final prayer had come true. God was dead. But something else had learned how to live.
Epilogue: The monastery that learned to speak. They say St. Renaud's monastery has been abandoned for more than a century. No records remain, no monks, no prayers. Only a ruin hidden among the fog-drowned cliffs of the Ardennes, its bell tower leaning like a finger raised in warning toward heaven. But legends never sleep. I was not a pilgrim when I found it. Only a traveler, seeking shelter from the rain. The forest had swallowed the road, and my lantern was fading when I saw the spire, its outline sharp against a bruised sky. When I pushed open the door, the smell of dust and myrrh filled my lungs. The air was thick, ancient. I thought at first it was only the dampness of stone, but then I heard it. A breath. Long, slow, impossibly deep, like wind drawn through the throat of the world. The floorboards trembled beneath my boots. The candle in my hand flickered, not from draught but from rhythm. It was breathing. The monastery was breathing. I stepped inside. Every sound I made came back to me softer, delayed, as if someone else were following, echoing my movements a heartbeat later. The corridors were lined with murals, faded beyond recognition, except one, painted above the altar. It showed a man kneeling before a great shadow, his hands raised, his mouth open as though in prayer, or scream. Beneath him, words etched in Latin. Et factus est spiritus ius templum. And his spirit became the temple. I brushed away the dust, and froze. The paint beneath my touch was warm. And then, from deep within the walls, a voice whispered my name. Not loudly. Not cruelly. But familiar. It sounded tired, sorrowful, and very much alive. Welcome, it said. You made it back. The air thickened. The ground exhaled, and the candle in my hand went out. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, but the darkness wasn't empty, it pulsed, faintly glowing from within, veins of light spreading across the stone like the faint rise of breath beneath skin. Whispers slithered through the air, hundreds of them, weaving together like a single prayer spoken by 1,000 tongues. Some cried, some prayed, some simply gasped. And one, calm and steady, rose above the rest. It was a man's voice. Soft, gentle. Resigned. Do not be afraid, it said. I am Brother Elias. The walls shuddered, and I saw, just for a heartbeat, the faint outline of a face pressing through the stone. Eyes closed. Mouth moving with the rhythm of a breath that was no longer his. I tried to stop it, he whispered. But I could not. It breathes through us now. The air around me vibrated, alive with every word. Each exhale carried dust, light, and voices. The monastery spoke through the breath of those it had taken. And then I understood what the inscription meant. Brother Elias hadn't died in these walls. He had become them. The monastery drew one long, shuddering breath. The floor rose. The crucifix on the altar tilted forward. And in the darkness, I heard it whisper again, not as a voice, but as a chorus. Breathe, child. The air pressed against me, warm and relentless, pushing into my lungs. And before I could resist, I inhaled. For a moment, I could hear them all, the saints, the sinners, the forgotten. Every prayer ever whispered in this place still alive, still echoing through stone and time. And when I exhaled, the monastery exhaled with me. The dust swirled, the floor trembled, and through the darkness, a single phrase took shape, spoken not in Latin, nor in the voice of men, but in the sound of 1,000 steady lungs. We are the breath of God now. Then came the silence. The true, eternal silence. The kind that only comes after the world remembers how to breathe again.